open session and a special closed session on May 27th. Is there a motion to approve the, oh, yes, Mr. Cohen?
I was just going to move to approve. I wanted to make a comment that I had a slight modification to the May 11th minutes, which I passed on to Ms. Williams and have already been incorporated into the minutes. But with that change, I move the approval.
That was
I second.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes all pass in block. And I want to thank the clerk's office for turning back these minutes so quickly. I think we've been really up to date this year, and the council appreciates it and the public appreciates it. So thank you for that. Next we come to announcements, and we'll start with Mr. Cohen. Any announcements this evening?
I do not have any announcements, no.
Okay, and Ms. Fraga, any announcements?
I do, and it's on behalf of the Civil Rights Commission, and they actually prepared it for me, so I'm going to read it if you don't mind. So the Civil Rights Commission has been inspired by the popular uprisings of the last few weeks, as big as any social movement the country has ever seen, asserting the sanctity of Black people's lives, demanding justice in cases of police violence, and calling for structural change to provide for the well-being and safety of all Americans. In the next few weeks, the Civil Rights Commission is planning to coordinate a series of community forums where Princeton residents will be invited to give voice to their own experiences with injustice and outline their visions of well-being, security, and safety. Each session will be focused on specific areas of concern. The planning committee will soon be announcing the dates for the planned series. Planned series. Based on what they hear, the Civil Rights Commission will make recommendations to the municipal government about policy decisions necessary to make good on words like democracy, equality, freedom, and well-being. And if you will allow me, they also asked me to read a passage written, authored by James Baldwin, and it's from No Name in the Street. And the passage is, if one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country, one does not question the policemen, the lawyers, the judges, or the protected members of the middle class. One goes to the unprotected, those precisely who need the law's protection most, and listens to their testimony. Ask any Mexican, any Puerto Rican, any Black man, any poor person, ask the wretched how they fare in the halls of justice. And then you will know, not whether or not the country is just, but whether or not it has any love for justice or any concept of it. It is certain in any case that ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. And that's on behalf of the Civil Rights Commission.
Wow.
Thank you.
That also comes
Well said.
from us. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Niedergang, any announcements?
No announcements.
Okay. Mr. Williamson?
Yes, Mayor, just a quick announcement regarding the pool and our summer camps. The Recreation Commission is going to move up our meeting, which normally would be scheduled for later in the month. We're moving it to June 18th at 7 p.m. Because, of course, considering the COVID environment, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made regarding some of our summer activities, particularly what's going to happen with the pool. We know that these are things that our town enjoy. And so at the June 18th meeting, the commission plans to, of course, invite the public, as they're always welcome, but they can come in and present their points. And of course, decisions have to be made considering the safety of the participants and also the employees and the safety of our entire community. So we're just inviting everyone to come out to the, well, it will be a Zoom meeting as they come out to the meeting, but to attend the June 18th at 7 p.m. Princeton Recreation Commission's Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Sachs, any announcements?
No announcements.
And Ms. Pearn-Lambros, any announcements?
Just a quick reminder, an invitation that we'll have the business call, the Zoom call weekly. It'll be again this Thursday at 10 a.m. And if you're not getting the notifications with the Zoom information to come online, you can sign up on our website. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And are there any staff announcements? Nope, okay. Then we'll move on to the proclamation for this evening, which I'll refer everybody to the agenda packet for the full verbiage on this, but it is, or it was National Gun Violence Awareness Day this past Friday. And many of us were wearing orange in honor of that day. And some of us are wearing orange tonight because very impressive. Although Dwayne, I would say your orange is a little, it's Leticia's really a lighter wearing shade. The orange tonight. Yeah. Yeah,
this is my summer shade of orange.
There you go. But obviously this is an extremely serious topic, and gun violence is one of the many problems facing our country right now. And this is an important issue for Princeton and for really every community in the country. So we encourage you to read the resolution, and council will continue to support the efforts to make our community safe and to push for safer gun laws in New Jersey and the country. Next, we come to public comments for items that are not already on the agenda. So we actually had quite a few people send in email comments ahead of the meeting that in a minute I'm going to ask Mr. DeShield to read through those comments that we've received so far. If you're tuning in right now and would like to make a comment for an item that's not already on the agenda, I ask that you use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit your comment in writing. If you are listening by phone and would like to email your comment to us instead, then you should email your comment to princetoncomments@gmail.com, and that will be read into the record as well. So with that, I'm gonna ask Mr. DeShield to start us off, and if you could please read the comments that have been submitted so far.
Thank you, Mayor. The first comment is from Mr. Walter Wernick. I am amplifying the demands of the movement of Black Lives Matter in demanding that Mayor Lampert and the Princeton City Council pledge today, June 8th, 2020, to defund the police in Princeton and adopt a policy recommendation of #8to-abolish, following the lead of Minneapolis City Council over the weekend. This is not a radical proposal, but is consistent with the recent budget trends in Princeton. Police budget in 2020, excluding vehicle maintenance, appropriated for $7.7 million, which represents a $252,000 cut from the 2019 appropriations of $8 million. This 3% reduction is a small part, but in the moment calls for much greater ambition in reimagining what our town and broader society could look like if we redirected funds away from policing, which in Princeton will represent a remarkable 1/8 of the town's total budget, the total and towards social goods. In the last 3 years, the Princeton Police Department underexpended its appropriations, not including vehicle maintenance, by a combined $731,000. i.e. 225,000, 12 less than budget in 2019, 165,000 less than the budget in 2018, and 340 less than the 2017. This is a clear signal that Princeton City Council needs to stop over appropriating funds to the police department and redeploy their resources towards much needed public services in town. Next comment comes from Christina D. I would like to strongly voice my support for opening the community park this year. I can only imagine the challenge this will bring to the teams that will be tasked with implementing new restrictive operations protocol, but the spirit of Princeton is to learn in these challenges, not always as the uncertainties of the future months loom. What we know now is that there is certainly a reprieve with respect to infections in New Jersey. At this moment, we can take a deep breath, decompress, and get ready for the challenges in the fall and winter will bring. We need the summer to recharge and to see our children's mental health improve. Yes, it's risky. Yes, it will be extremely difficult, but not impossible. I believe our community can do this. And extra manpower is needed. I will commit to volunteering time, recruiting others to volunteer, and to make it happen. Whatever capacity we may need to use, my children are competitive swimmers, and I, and all of our other families, we are no strangers to contributing volunteer time. I am certain you are not taking this lightly, but the community is committed to sharing our support and enthusiasm of the opening this summer. We need it more than ever.
May I interrupt a minute? Mark, your audio is breaking up. I thought it was my computer, but I'm getting texts about it. I don't know if you
Sure.
can adjust.
I'm going to try to move forward a little bit.
Thank you. Very, very good.
The next one comes from Rachel Richmond. As a graduate student who resides in Princeton for the past 2 years, I can honestly say that this is the safest community I ever lived. I am choosing to move out of Princeton at the end of the month because it's not a place where I can see myself building a life. While the university has continues to build new housing for graduate students, the lack of affordable apartments makes it impossible for my partner and I to live here. Let's raise children here. Why does the town of Princeton look down on renters and community members who cannot afford to buy $1 million properties? Over $8 million expended on the Princeton police and only $100,000 spent on the Affordable Housing Agency in 2019 adopted budget. I am leaving Princeton because Princeton does not seem to want me. It does not seem to value the contributions of lower income people, professionals, and graduate students could provide to the community. While I know these numbers are reductive, by funding the police department at literally 80 times the rate of affordable housing, not to mention the active pushback against building multi-unit housing, Princeton demonstrates through cash that its priorities is to protect and serve the current property owners. But can we imagine a different future where the homeowners coexist with a thriving, diverse population of apartment dwellers while subsidizing space, allow new immigrants and new graduates to start local businesses? The council inevitably faces budgetary crisis that the COVID-19 has wrought. I'd like to call Princeton to shift its resources away from policing in with the cause of the protesters across the country and toward affordable housing and other line items that create more sustainable and welcoming multi-income future in the town. Thank you. The next one is from Cecilia Boutre. We are residents of Princeton at 199 Snowden Lane. Following Governor Murphy's announcement that public schools are permitted to open on June 22nd, we would like to let you know how much we appreciate Community Park Pool and that we are really hoping we will be opening Community Park School for socially distanced team practices. Rebecca Hoke. My name is Rebecca Hoke, and I am a soon-to-be second-year student at the Princeton Theological Seminary. I'm to you all because I'm concerned about the seeming lack of oversight of the Princeton Police Department. It has been brought to my attention that the Princeton Police Department has not yet begun to use body cameras for its officers. I know the soft deadline for having this requirement for all officers is August. Given the current circumstances and the climate in the country, there should be greater urgency felt in an effort to provide more security for all community members.
Mark, it's still not good, your audio. I don't know if you can, yeah, maybe face the computer, sorry.
But does someone else have the questions maybe who could read them? Like maybe that would be a possible solution. I'm like missing 80, I'm like missing a lot and it's frustrating.
Just hold on one second.
Thank you, Mark.
The issue may be that Mark has to turn to read as opposed to facing the system.
I'm gonna try this.
Right.
Mark, now you sound fine.
Now it's good?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's much better.
Okay. The next one comes from Mark Wang. We just moved here and my kids think the most attractive part of town is a swimming pool and community park. We really hope the pool is open soon. The next one comes from Alfredo Sanchez. I am a graduate student from the Princeton Seminary, and I believe that we will need to defund the police so that we can fund educational programs for our adolescent students. There should be more counselors, student aides, social clubs added to the educational system so that it would be better prevent students from participating in crimes later. The police never prevent crimes in our town in as much as they show up to the scene too late. Placing resources for our children today will place preventive measures for tomorrow. Also, promoting healthy social atmospheres post-COVID will only strengthen our community as a whole to lessen the prospect of conflicts later. The next one comes from Eli Berman. I am a Princeton graduate who would like to urge the council to defund the Princeton police in order to increase budgets for the necessary community resources, such as affordable housing, hiring bilingual aides for immigrant students in town, and the Princeton Human Services Department, which has been resorting to private donations to provide foods, sanitation to residents in needed during the pandemic. This could all be better funded by stripping the police of its larger budget. The next one comes from Kaylee Rantag. I'm writing to advocate that the Princeton Council decrease funding of the police department and use the money instead to fund education, healthcare, essential social services, and to take some of the roles of the police currently play in Princeton. For example, training mental health professionals could be called to assist persons with mental health crises. This would lead to less violence and fear in the community and reduce mass incarceration. At the time I am submitting this comment, the municipality web link for the 2020 budget was broken. The 2019 approved budget, largest appropriation for the police department at $8 million, not including the department's vehicle maintenance. The appropriation for the Health Commission, on the other hand, is less than $400,000. For the Human Services Commission, well under $200,000. In the middle of the most acute public health emergency of our lifetime, as well as the worst financial crisis most of us have witnessed, the town has asked private residents to donate basic hygiene products and food to our vulnerable residents. It is clear that there is funding imbalance here. I hope you consider my comments in your decision. Natalie Levine. I am glad that Princeton Police Department has been proactive in addressing residents' questions about their policies. I am glad to know that they were already implementing the 8 harm reduction policies known as #8can'twait. To reduce the harm they inflict on our community, we know the forms that harm can take. As we mourn the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Maurice Gordon, shot to death last month right here in New Jersey by a state trooper who was waiting with him for a tow truck, and many, many others. As a graduate of the Princeton Police Department Youth Academy, I want to speak on the record about my hope for how we as a community can go further in the work of keeping all of our residents of our town safe and healthy. At the time I'm submitting this comment, the municipal web link for the 2020 adopted budget is broken. The 2019 adopted budget, largest appropriations for the police department, $8 million, not including vehicle maintenance. The appropriation for the Health Commission, on the other hand, is less than $400,000. For the Human Services Commission, well under $200,000. In the middle of the most acute health emergency of our lifetime, as well as the worst financial crisis most of us have witnessed, town has asked for private residents to donate basic hygiene to our most vulnerable residents. Many of us here today support and attended the rally against violence held last week. But just because the police department didn't hit or shoot anyone at last week's protest doesn't mean we need them there. Black organizers across the country are calling for anti-racist Americans to show up for the justice, not just by demonstrating, painting signs, chalking roadways, but also by working to shift the resources away from policing and towards programs in our communities needed to be healthy and safe. We've done this before. In 2010, the size of the department was cut in the face of economic recession. In this year's budget presentation, the police department's salary appropriation was also reduced. In the coming year, hard choices are going to need to be made about what to scale back and where to invest. I want to encourage everyone who is here tonight to imagine what we would be like in our next budget cycle, to shift our resources away from weapons, armor, and surveillance, and towards food security, health services, affordable housing, accessible transportation, educational equity, senior service, and sustainability. And go back up. And this comes from Eric. Thank you for opening up your meeting to the public. The community parks pool is highlight of my family's summer. We are all lap swimmers in the pool, and both of my children, Calvin and Sabin, swim with the bluefish. This is my son's last year. He's graduating from Princeton High School this year, and it would mean a lot to all of us if he could please open the community park pool for the final season of eligibility. And the next one, thank you for holding the meeting. Our family has just moved to Princeton last summer, and we love Community Park School. I sincerely hope that the Community Park School will open as soon for social distance swimming and practices. And these are all the comments I have from the email site.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes, please.
You know, because I love my country, and I have 328 million people, and I love my Black people of 40 million people, I think nothing does more of a disservice to Black progress than tying it to something that everyone knows is not going to happen. We're not going to defund our police. We need law enforcement. So if people really believe in the betterment for Black people, instead of coming out with these, and I know what happened in Minneapolis, et cetera, the bottom line is we know law enforcement is going to be there. So please do not tie things that we really need, such as social justice, more affordable housing, better education, to something we know is not going to happen. What you eventually get from tying things that ridiculous, I should say ridiculous, I apologize, because I think I'm going to say that I hope those who commented are acting in good faith when they talk about defunding the police. But when you tie real progress to something that you know is not going to happen, all you do is you put a weight around the neck of progress. If we really want real progress, let's talk about real things that we can look at, whether it's better training for police. There's a legitimate question of whether or not our police should wear body cams, but please don't tell me you're doing me a favor as a Black man or any Black people a favor by advocating for something that will only play into the hands of people who are against Black Lives Matter, folks who are going out there saying, what do they want? A society of anarchy, a society where we get rid of a police and it's not just when it comes to issues of policing, issues of preventing criminality. You're saying so everyone we could have DUI drivers every Saturday night running over people. No one's to stop, have people slow down. So let's stop being, I'm hesitating from using the word ridiculous. But let's start talking about real progress and real things we can do to make our society better than tying progress for people to something that we know is not going to happen. So that's not doing me a favor. It's not doing the 40 million Black Americans a favor. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. We have some additional comments that have come in on Q&A, and I just wanted to just also respond that we've heard from a couple people that the link for our 2020 budget on the website is broken, so we'll make sure to get that fixed. And that, I think there are a lot of provocative comments tonight. As Ms. Fraga said in her announcements, there's going to be a lot of community conversations that are being planned by the Civil Rights Commission. And so, we hope to engage the community and talk about these important issues and how we can best position Princeton for the future. But I did want to read some of these additional comments. Ms. Fraga?
I just want to add to what you said, that what the Civil Rights Commission, as far as organizing dialogues, and it's not just about talking, it's about actually hearing from our residents and hearing, also we want to hear solutions that they feel what we need to improve on, because any policy solutions that we might want to implement, we want it to be community driven, to where we're hearing from the public what their concerns are, but also what can we do as a community to improve.
Thank you. And there were also a few of the comments asking about our commitment to affordable housing. And I would say, please stay tuned because there will be a report on that as soon as we're done with the public comment. So reading these comments that are coming in on the Q&A, the first one is from Patricia Saul. Please fix the audio. These letters are important to hear. Hopefully you were able to hear them, and since we have them in writing, I assume they get published as part of the minutes when those come back to council. Next is from Camilla Troll. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anybody's name. Is there a possibility that the pool will open on June 22nd? I don't believe that there will be, because the pool, and Mr. Williamson can chime in here, the pool is not something where you just decide you're going to unlock the gate and let people in. It takes the recreation department at least a few weeks to get systems up and running there. And I don't have the date right in front of me, but I know that they had postponed the date when they could potentially open. And I can't remember when that date is, but as Mr. Williams had said in his report, the rec board will be meeting on the 18th, I
Yes.
believe, to make a
is correct.
determination. And then if they decide to move forward with opening, that process is going to take longer than 4 days. So
May take as much as a month, if I may, Mayor.
right. So unfortunately, a June 22nd opening date is unlikely, but listen, it's like, I think all of us, especially the rec department, know how important the community park pool is for the community.
Yes.
And, you know, I think the motivation is to do everything we can to make sure, you know, if we are able to open, that we do that in a safe way. And that's going to be the goal. All right, next is from Zoe Stokes. I am a swimmer of the Excel swim team based in Princeton. We are anxious to get back into the pool. We want to urge you to open the pool on June 22nd, as per Governor Murphy's announcement today. Please consider opening the pool for the 2020 summer season. Next is from CK. Good evening, Mayor and Princeton Town Council members. Our daughter is a member of Excel Swimming. She is a rising senior in high school and currently being looked at by college coaches. Excel Swimming is a club team that trains swimmers at a high intensity level. They train national swimmers and those focusing on college level swimming. If the pool could be opened for training by various club teams in the area, it would be greatly appreciated. If there is a concern with cost or low membership, the swim teams would alleviate that cost. Excel Swimming trains responsible swimmers who would act responsibly under the direction of their coaches. Swimmers train early in the morning often and would be able to follow the guidelines set by USA Swimming, New Jersey Swimming, and the CDC guidelines for social distancing. There are plans in place to utilize lanes for training. Please open the community park pool. Thank you for your time and God bless you. Next is Amy Bitterman. We love Bluefish. My family counts down the days until Bluefish starts every year, and then a heart emoji. All right. And then, yep.
There was a one at the very beginning, and it seems to have been put into the dismissed category, and I think it's very important to read, and it's from Wilma Solomon about the Not in Our Town Awards. I'm happy to read it.
Okay, I'll get back to that in a second. Also, Amy Bitterman, please open the pool for the public in Bluefish. Annie Hungskanga, thank you for holding this meeting. Our family just moved into Princeton last summer. We love the community park pool, and it is our sincere hope that CPP will be open soon for socially distant swim team practices. Stay safe. And then Phyllis Bernard, my name is Ariel Bernard, and I have been swimming for 10 years. I swim for Excel Swimming in Princeton. Swimming is very important to me and my teammates, and we have been out of the pool for several months. We would greatly appreciate it if you would open community park pool for our team as well as other area teams. Swimmers are dedicated and disciplined. We promise to follow strict social distancing policies, will not use the locker rooms, and will follow all the rules. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my concerns. Nishi Shah, how are you planning to open community swimming pools? We also want our kids to continue engaged in the competitive sport activities under CDC and state guidelines. Zoe Stokes, don't you have enough time to open the pool now? Shelley Krause, friends who are interested in educating themselves regarding alternative ways of imagining our way forward with regards to policing should please read about Camden's dismantling and rebuilding of their police force, and also watch John Oliver's half-hour recent overview on Last Week Tonight, June 7th episode, available on YouTube. Christina DeVenti, why isn't rec meeting moving up sooner to discuss the pool issue? Amy Bitterman, coming from the Bittermans, please open the pool. We have record-setting swimmers in this family, and it's time to open accordingly. Great program and amazing coaches. Nana B, these competitive swimmers need to get in the water now. KD, fighting this virus has brought different challenges to each and every person. There's no knowing what the fall months will bring us, but as of right now, I believe that we as a community can abide by social distancing rules to allow for a summer as normal as possible. CP has provided me with so much friends, a team, and a job. I hope that you will consider that the pool is much more than a place to hang out. Kim Dorman. I'm not sure I have words. I would like to point out that Camden defunded in part its police department, so it is not entirely ridiculous. Many people I have heard from are trying to imagine what could be possible. I'm saddened that you use words like ridiculous for members of our community who are trying to find ways to support our community and make it an even better place.
May I respond to that, Mayor? Just quickly. First of all,
Yeah,
Camden,
definitely. And while you're responding, I'm just gonna make a note. There's a couple people who have put in several comments on the chat, and I'm not gonna keep repeating. I feel like if you want to have one comment, that's fine. But
Just a quick
there's
one.
a couple more comments just on the pool, then we need to be able to hear from others who haven't had a chance to comment yet. But go ahead, Mr. Williamson.
Years ago, Camden defunded its police force because Camden couldn't afford a police force, the city of Camden. So the county, Camden County, created a police force that polices the city of Camden. In fact, the police force that Camden County created was larger than the Camden City Police Force. The point is, you're not doing me a favor and Black folks a favor by saying you're going to defund police and not have police. And when we're trying to get to real progress, that's a nice pie in the sky thing that makes some people feel good. And I apologize if people are offended by me using the word ridiculous, but I care about real Black Lives Matter. You cannot try to offer something that you know is going to get so much backlash and impede the real progress that Black people are trying to make by coming up with things that sounds good to whomever it sounds good to. But at the end of the day, it doesn't sound good, I think, to most people. It's only going to get so much backlash that you impede other real progress. Things like properly funding affordable housing, things like better policing, things like, yes, you could put funding into areas where they're properly needed. But when you're saying defunding the police, you may say, maybe we'll look at, I even hesitate to say reducing police forces. Let's have real legitimate arguments and real legitimate debates. When I say arguments, I mean in a negative sense. Real legitimate debates about real progressive issues, not pie in the sky issues that sound good to some, but invite so much backlash. Your real legitimate progress cannot happen. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's why I know I got a little heated, but it just makes me upset that when people are trying to do real progress. Imagine if Martin Luther King at the I Have a Dream speech said, let's get rid of all police forces. Do you think we'd have gotten the 64 Civil Rights Act? You think we'd have gotten the Voting Rights Act of 65? No, let's talk about real progress than whatever this pie in the sky stuff that some people are talking about that really impedes the real progress for Black folks. And if you're going to use examples, please use the examples that you properly research. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. I'm going to read 3 more comments, and then I think we'll just I'll see if we can finish all the public comment that's come in. But if I want to be able to get to the rest of the meeting, and then we'll open up public comment and make sure we hear the comments at the very end of the meeting if people haven't had a chance to get their comment read at this point. So these will be the final 3 for now. Wilma Solomon from 41 TR Place. Not in Our Town, Princeton honors 13 students with our Unity Awards for their work to further racial justice and equity and to build inclusive communities in their schools and beyond. We also say goodbye to and acknowledge Superintendent Steve Cochran with the Unity Award in honor of his accomplishments. These include an equity audit to evaluate areas where inequity exists, expansion of the preschool program, efforts to recruit staff at historically Black colleges and universities, and championing of student wellness and mental health. Our student awardees are Princeton Charter School, Sanya Kumar, Princeton High School, Michaela Guo, Kenya Morales, Ella Norman, Abba Smith, Jillian Bartels Kwanzaa, Renea Bartels Kwanzaa, Kali Benjamin, Tanya Harris, Sophia Hellstrunk, Yanni Ince, and Sanuka Prakash Madakanavar, and Sky Reynolds. So congratulations to all those students and to Superintendent Cochran. Jocelyn Yen, thank you for the opportunity that allows us to comment. We reside in the Little Brook section and would like to express our sincere appreciation of the wonderful work done by Princeton Recreation Department throughout the years, with Governor Murphy announcing public pools can be open as of June 22nd. We'd like to request a community park pool be open this summer and allow for socially distanced swim team practices. We look forward to finding out more at the June 18th Zoom live meeting, but just would like to share our strong desire and interest. Thank you again. And Sabine Ristad. Hi, my name is Sabine Ristad and I live at 137 Parkside and attend JW. I swim on 3 teams in Princeton, JW, Bluefish, and Excel. Every summer I enjoy swimming at the community park, and I would like it if this summer I could swim again at Community Park. This would be my 5th season as a Bluefish, and it is the highlight of my summer. Okay, and then I'm just going to read one final comment, and then I think we can wrap up public comment. This is from Smithson. Good evening. Thank you for taking comments and your time. My daughter swims for Excel Swimming, and we as a team, swimmers, coaches, and parents are very excited for the pool to potentially open. Swimmers are extremely disciplined and they have been waiting for months to get back into the water and train. Parents are all willing to volunteer and help in any way we can to help open the pool and make sure all social distancing rules are followed by the swimmers. Thank you, and we hope for some swim practices in our near future. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for, I think that was one of our best public comments in terms of the volume of comments for a really long time, and we appreciate hearing from everybody. So thank you, but I am going to close public comment at this time, and we're going to move on to reports. And I want to flip the order of this if Mr. DeShield is ready, and we'll start with the affordable housing update.
You're muted, Mark.
You're on mute, Mark. I think you muted and then you unmuted and then muted.
Here we go. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give Mayor and Council and the public just kind of an overview and an update of where we are with the affordable housing process. As Mayor and Council are aware, we're in the process of finishing up all the requirements we need for our compliance requirements that are necessary for us based on the settlement that we completed earlier this year. However, with the onset of the COVID-19, we should have had this approved by June. However, we did get an extension until August 12th based on the COVID pandemic. So what I really wanted to do is just kind of give you an idea of what are the next steps that we need to go through in terms of Council's approval process of compliance mechanisms for the affordable housing. The first thing that you'll see before Council in terms of the compliance mechanisms is the introduction of the affordable housing ordinance. This will be a new ordinance that is on Council's agenda for June 15th. In addition to that, you will have the affirmative marketing plan that will also be introduced on Council on the 15th. There will be a public hearing July 9th for those 2 items. These items, there's a lot of coordination that's necessary for all of these to ensure that Planning Board, the Affordable Housing, the Housing Commission is able to review these. For example, last week, the Housing Board had an opportunity to review both the draft affordable housing plan and affirmative marketing plan. I just wanted to talk about that process a little bit because Council will be getting that next week. And there were some questions based on our settlement in earlier this year. We agreed with Fair Share Housing that we would follow all of the regulations outlined in UHAG. And those are very strict regulations. There are some
Mark, can you just explain what UHAG is for?
Uniform Housing Regulations. There are some regulations that we've had in our previous ordinances that were approved by COA and are above the UHAG requirements. However, the ordinance that will come before Council has to be strictly adherent to the UHAG requirements. We did have some conversations with the Housing Board, and we're looking to develop ways in which we can get to the same place using different mechanisms. For example, One of the things that we do in Princeton is we calculate the housing prices differently based on income. What we're going to do as an alternative is create a subsidy program that will subsidize and still allow people to purchase homes based on income versus the price. So that the Housing Board will be working on that. And there's a couple of small items like that where we will make those determinations. In addition, on the 15th, we will be doing the mandatory set-aside ordinance, which is the 20% set-aside ordinance that will go throughout town. The next thing that we will have is there are a number of ordinances for the inclusionary zoning properties throughout town. We will have to put together zoning ordinances. Those will all be ready for introduction at our June 22nd meeting for introduction. So as you can see, there's not a lot of time. There's not going to be a lot of time in this process that's coming quickly. So each one of our committees will only have a short time to review those quickly and then to turn those around. The public hearing for those will be on July 9th for all of the AOH ordinances, which are the Nassau Street ordinances, the overlay ordinance. In addition to that, all of the inclusionary ordinances will be on the agenda that include the ordinances for the Franklin Avenue, the Terhune and Harrison, and the Northern S2. In addition to that, on July 13th, we'll have to approve the spending plan, approve a resolution with our intent to bond. That will be the resolution where the town will put, say that it will be responsible for ensuring that these units are built. And if they are not built, particularly those that are municipally sponsored, we will indicate that we will bond for those improvements if necessary. In addition to that, we'll be endorsing the Fair Share Housing Plan. There's a lot of other things that I just want to hit the highlights to be going on in between. In addition, the Fair Share Housing Plan, which is the bulk of the plan, will be going through the planning board during this period, and then a number of other items. So as you can see, it's going to be jam-packed for the next couple of weeks with affordable housing. We have a very strict timetable that we need to hit. And one of the important things I want to note to council is all of these compliance mechanisms are necessary. It's necessary for us to provide them to the court 30 days prior to the hearing. And as you can see, we're cutting this very close because the hearing is August 12th. And we'll be doing our introduction of some of these ordinances on July 13th. So we will have to give them the introduced ordinance. We will have to then approve those ordinances at the next meeting and provide those to the court before August 8th. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. And the rationale for having it 30 days in advance is just so that the court can review the mechanisms and make recommendations to the court. So we've done a lot of work. And one thing I just want to highlight because of the comments that we had recently, the town has been committed considerable financial resources towards a number of the projects. In addition to that, our obligation, we're actually over our obligation, which is unheard of in other communities. We are actually exceeding our obligation by 25 units. Do we have any questions?
Ms. Niedergang?
Thanks, Mr. DeShields. Can you just, in light of some of the comments about how much money we're providing for affordable housing, can you roughly give us an amount of money that Princeton is committing directly to supporting the development of affordable housing over the next couple of years?
And again, I don't have the figures in front of me, but on 2 projects alone, 2 to 3 projects, at least $5 million. And I don't think that covers it all, but we're making significant contributions to affordable housing.
Thank you.
And if I may add, a lot of affordable housing are public-private partnerships. So even though we have municipal money, there's a lot of private money also going to the development of affordable housing. And Princeton, it goes into many more millions than Mr. DeShields just mentioned.
And that's important to note. A large portion of our ability to provide affordable housing is through inclusionary zoning, in which we incentivize people to actually provide affordable housing. For example, the overlay zoning just on Nassau Street itself. We're not directly getting credit for that, but we're encouraging affordable housing there. In addition, we do have a trust fund. I know a lot of people looked at the budget and saw $100,000. We also have a trust fund for developers fees in which we do spend quite a bit of money out of those developers fees. When actually we put the spending plan together, we'll be able to outline our total investment in affordable housing.
Ms. Niedergang?
I just want to make, since I also moved to Princeton as a graduate student and really couldn't afford anything here, and that was many, many years ago, and moved out of town for a number of years because of that. So I have great sympathies for those who can't afford this town. It's not an inexpensive place to live. But I just wanted to outline, in addition to affordable housing, council is also taking some measures to increase the diversity of the housing stock. There'll be an ordinance coming up soon, what we're calling neighborhood character, the second part of neighborhood character, that will allow more accessory dwelling units, more duplexes, and we'll continue to work. Once that's in place, we'll continue to work on the next step in that, looking around town to see what parts of town are ripe for redesignation so that a single family home could become a duplex, or someone could build an accessory dwelling unit. And that's another way of increasing the affordable housing. The guidelines are very strict, but we also need what has been called missing middle housing, which are maybe accessory dwelling units or duplexes that will also allow people who can't afford the $1 million homes to be here. So we're addressing this issue in multiple ways.
And feasible solutions that can actually happen. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for Mr. DeShield? So I know there is a lot of interest in the community and the affordable housing projects we're going to be building. So I would say, check in on the website and please keep coming to our council meetings. There's going to be a lot on the agenda in the next couple months. And then we're also going to be, moving forward on some of the specific projects as well. And you'll see that. Yep, Ms. Fraga?
Yes, sorry, I did think of something only because it came to mind that I have been receiving emails from residents about how many of the units will be available for individuals with disabilities or who are differently able, because I know we have talked about it, that some of the developments will include that. And I've been getting some questions about approximately how many of those.
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out and we can publicize that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Leticia, was that a question about group homes, or is that a question about whether units were accessible?
No, not accessible, but for individuals who had disabilities or differently abled, and not necessarily physical mobility, but other disabilities.
Do you mean developmentally disabled
Yes.
adults? Is that?
Would
So
that be
I
the
think
group homes?
that's definitely part of the Avalon Bay
Yes.
building at Thanet, and there are 15 spots there. And that is still, in the planning phases. So it still needs to come before the planning board for approval, and then it will need to get constructed. The town also has currently several group homes, and we're in discussions. There might potentially be more units as well, but those haven't been finalized yet.
But for those that have asked, is that something that's available on our municipal website for anyone interested in who's looking for that type of home for their family member?
Let's check. I mean, I think that if somebody goes to the Affordable Housing Department or the Senior Resource Center, I think both agencies should be able to point them in the right direction. But let's look at the website and see what information is there.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, did you have a question?
I was just going to comment that I believe that those 15 or 16 units that are at 15 units that are at Thanet, that we have another 12 in group homes that were not yet identified, but that we're going to be part of the plan. So we do have quite a few of those units that will be coming online.
Right. And that's in addition to ones that have already been built, that that there's sometimes turnover there. So if people are interested, they should reach out so we can get their names on the waiting list for those. Any other questions for Mr. DeShield? Yeah, Mr. Cohen?
I just wanted to make one more comment about that, which is that a lot of the special needs housing that we do have available is in close proximity to the shopping center. And we're really pleased about that because there are a lot of employment opportunities there, both between McCaffrey's and the Blue Bear Cafe for those people with the special needs. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
And I see that Ed Truselli is listening and has his hand up, but like logistically, I don't know how to call on you. So if you wouldn't mind, if you have, if you just want to write something in the chat, if you want to make a comment, that's probably the easiest way. If you, I don't know if you had something that you wanted to add about the housing and where to get information. Right, I don't see that coming in yet. Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. DeShield? Nope. Okay. And I don't see anything from Ed. I don't know if you have anything, Mark, from him.
I do not.
No. Okay. Okay, then I think we'll move on to our other report this evening, and I'm happy to welcome Chief Sutter to our meeting. This has been I don't think there's been a time like this for our country where I think the attention has been focused on just a huge problem for our country. And we are lucky here in Princeton to have a partner in our police department and to have the leadership of Chief Sutter, who's been working on this issue of how do you create a model police department that is serving the needs of everybody in the community in an equitable way and in a respectful and fair way. So I'm thankful for his partnership and his leadership and for all the men and women in our police department for their hard work. And this is a challenging time for our country. And Princeton, even though we might have the best police department in the country, which is what I believe, there's still, I think, questions about, what does policing look like right now, and how do we move forward as a community? So we continue to be that model. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Sutter.
Thank you so much, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you tonight. I stand before you emotional, humble, and just really wishing for partnerships that we have in the community to stand strong and to, I guess, just indulge me and some comments I have to make. I make them knowing that the emotion is strong and that my voice may not be resonating with the same credibility it did just 2 weeks ago. So I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that. And I want to start by sharing some comments I have on the murder of Mr. Floyd. I want to talk about our department from a high level, kind of explain what we've been doing for the last many years. And then I wanted to, if you would allow me to make a comment on the peaceful gathering we had last week and our response to that and give it some context. So I first learned of the murder of Mr. Floyd from my son, a 16-year-old boy who grew up being told that policing was righteous, just, and honorable. And I still feel that way. But I saw in his face that night that he may have thought I'd been lying to him, or that I had been giving him just my perspective on policing, because he saw what I saw. And he saw a police officers commit a murder and throw out every ounce. It just goes without beyond words of, it doesn't even relate to my understanding of policing. It's not even policing, it's murder. And I realized at that point that I had a lot of work immediately to do with him and my family, my friends, who all heard me talk about policing for many years. And I knew in the community, and I knew that all the legitimacy that I feel we've earned here in Princeton could have been largely undone at that point. And I understand why. 25 years ago tonight, I graduated the police academy. And I graduated the academy on the heels of the Rodney King tragedy and the unrest in Los Angeles. And I was actually part of what was considered a reform in policing. That's how I looked at myself at the time. That's how I was, what we talked about in my interviews and my pre-hiring, and what we were taught about in the academy, that I would be part of a new day in policing where these issues were being addressed through community partnerships and new policing. And 25 years later, I'm standing here talking to you about the same issues. And it's disheartening, it's upsetting, but I have to remain hopeful, and I have to remain on those officers that we are hiring now and the community members that we have moving forward, that we're gonna make positive change together. I have to keep that hope, but I understand fully how many people may not. I want to acknowledge the importance of listening. I feel right now it's my job to listen. I'm going to say a few things tonight. I don't want it to sound defensive. It's not defensive. It's meant to give, when I speak about the department, just some form of comfort and credibility as to what we've been doing. But I understand it's just my words. And, my words will only go so far, and I understand that. I do, as I said, I want to listen. I want the community to know that they will be heard, and I acknowledge every emotion and every concern that's been shared with me up to this point and that will be shared with me going forward. I've learned about listening, about keeping an open mind, and more now than ever, I'm committed to that principle, to those principles, and I assure you that our department will be. We will not be defensive about this. We will not be argumentative in trying to defend our positions. We want constructive, open conversation, and we're going to do better. We always can do better. I think we're doing good in Princeton, but we have to always do better. So I just wanted to acknowledge how this incident, as I watched it and then couldn't process it. I didn't process it right away. I couldn't, my brain wasn't processing what my eyes had seen. And when I did process it, it felt as if it happened in Princeton. It felt that strong, and still does to me. It feels as if it happened here. And that's how we're going to acknowledge it and treat it. Because to many people, it did happen here. And I understand that. It's as if it happened in all our communities across the country. So that's my perspective on what has occurred. And I just want to make sure I give respect and credibility to the emotions, to the concerns, and that because it didn't happen here, I don't want anybody to think that I'm not taking responsibility. We all own some responsibility in terms of learning and getting better because of it. And that's just absolutely from the heart of how I feel. I've often said in the department, I've been saying this recently, I've always believed that the true integrity of a person, of any person, is the honest integrity. What the person is made of is most evident when nobody's watching. It's easy to have integrity. It's easy to try to show integrity and be a good person when people are watching you. But you really find out about a person when they think nobody's watching. And I say the same thing about a police department. It's very easy for a police department to sit here before their governing bodies, for me to sit before you, before their communities, and to tell you we're going to do better. We have to do better. But I would expect you to ask me, what have you been doing? Yeah, now that there's a national spotlight on this again, sure, it's easy for us to say that. But I feel absolutely strongly that with the community, right alongside with the community, with the governing body, we've really been engaging in reform at the cutting edge of policing for years. And I feel good about that, but I also feel really sad that I know in one incident, any one incident, it could be undone. And I feel like it's definitely been undone, and that we have to once again get back to work and reprove ourselves. But I want to assure the community, I've talked about this at council. Council has asked me in depth, month after month, about things like our use of force, how many times we use force. We go through the individual incidents every month. I talk about our 5-tier review process, how these aren't mandates. This review process is not mandated. It's mandated by our department. We review it through 5 levels internally. When deadly force or force that could result in serious injury or death occurs, we go to the Attorney General's office and the prosecutor's office for reviews. That's the 6th and 7th level. We track our use of force cases by officer on the aggregate, and also who our force is being used against with regard to all different demographics, so that we can trace the trends. We've been doing this for years. We've developed and implemented an early warning system. We did an early warning system before it was mandated by the state. It now is in congruence with all the state policies. And what that early warning system does, it shows a problem and it shows trends before they're problems and trends. We are committed to rooting out police misconduct and criminality, period. But again, I understand that those are words, and we have to be judged by our actions. We commissioned years ago, I believe in 2015, a proactive study by the Rutgers Institute of Policing on trends within the department with regard to citizen interactions, motor vehicle stops, and race and ethnicity. This was a proactive undertaking that we did because we wanted to be transparent. We published those results. We use those same testing mechanisms quarterly in our department still, and we release those findings. Finally, and I think most importantly, we have worked so very, very, very hard on recruiting and cultivating a diverse and competent police force and supervisory staff. This is where, to me, and I've talked about this at length for years, this is it's not only the foundation of the department, it's the culture of the department. It's where everything starts and finishes. We recruit morally strong, diverse people that represent our community. I've said before, I can train someone to be a police officer. I cannot train someone to be a good moral person that would never stand for what we saw in Minneapolis. I can't teach that. And that's a problem. I feel like maybe that's been a major problem in policing is culture and recruitment, and that who are we bringing in amongst our ranks? How are we creating our culture? And I've concentrated on that. I shouldn't say we've concentrated on that so very hard in this police department, because I know when we bring an officer in here, you and our community are going to have that officer for 30 years. And I don't take it lightly. And I feel so strongly and so positive about our progress in recruiting. We've done it side by side as partners, and we put a lot of effort into it. And it's things like that, again, I don't want it to sound like it's defensive or that I'm trying to prove the effectiveness or efficiency of the department. I'm just trying to convey the message that we have been in the department and in our communities dealing with these very difficult issues for many years. And we've been out in front of them. We've been honest about them. We've talked about them openly. And I'm just so hopeful that people that are aware of that and have been with us through this recognize it and can acknowledge it to some point and have conversations about it. But again, I'm not asking for people to defend or otherwise, take our part. I just want to at least have some type of place to start, that people know where we're at and where we're building from. We are not reinventing ourselves or remanufacturing something that isn't already in place. We're going to get better. We're going to stay with the latest in policing and the latest in reforms, and we're going to get better. But I just think it's important that the community knows where we're kind of starting at. And then finally, I wanted to just talk about the gathering last week on Nassau and Witherspoon Street. It was last Tuesday. Just briefly, that event, peaceful event, wonderful event. I was absolutely, it was something to see the community come together like that, to see that in person. That event came together very quickly. And I want everybody, I think it's very important for everyone to understand, or it's important how it's viewed, the perspective from which our presence and preparations are viewed. We have a responsibility to protect the public safety through traffic, and safety and to protect the safety of the attendees at any such event. To not prepare for safety in an event like that and just to allow it to organically happen without any type of precaution on my part would be malfeasant. And I just want to also acknowledge that I am solely responsible for the preparations for such events. Well, I work with the department. All the decisions that are made ultimately lay at my feet. So, when people are upset with decisions that are made, I would ask that it should be projected right on me. Our officers just carry out and to the best of their ability, the mission of the police department. So with that being said, the footprint of this event was the exact same footprint. The operations plan was the exact footprint of Communiversity Day, in that we were there to do traffic, respond to calls for safety and help, and protect the attendees from the types of threats that come along with gatherings like that. We were not there for the peaceful protesters, only to help them, only to be with them and protect them, just like we do at Communiversity or the Marathon. Furthermore, leading up to that event, we did have highly, highly, highly credible, and I emphasize highly credible, threats in Princeton. And those were all contemplated in the operations plan. So with regard to a specific incident that occurred, there was a medical request. I happened to be in that crowd, and people were yelling for help and requesting the police because an attendee, a person at the very front of the crowd, had collapsed. I responded as well on foot in that crowd. What occurred was the first aid squad, because of the size of the crowd, needed to have escort to get through the crowd. And they requested an escort from our command post. At the time, because all of our officers were deployed on other posts and answering calls for service around the community, all those calls continued to come in. We had officers, 4 officers, I believe, that were dressed in protective padding. Those officers are intended to be out of sight, never deployed, only in an emergency. We have to have that type of emergency response available to us when there's a need for it. And thank goodness, there's rarely a need for it, but we have to be prepared for it. And what had occurred was there was no other officers available to get those first aid members into the crowd, and the first aid members couldn't get in and requested their assistance. They deployed because they were the only people available. And in retrospect, well, at the time, not actually in retrospect, at the time, I immediately recognized what the response was among some of the members in attendance, some of the people in attendance, and what it could be from our community. So let me tell you that I'm completely sympathetic to it. I completely get it. I got it right away. And as a matter of fact, we moved so quickly. There was another medical request about a half hour later, and those officers were not deployed. We had already made alternative actions to get the first aid squad in. So for those that were frightened, I apologize. It wasn't the intent. But I can't say that we shouldn't have that type of response. Simply protection for officers to get to a thing that unfortunately is becoming too common in our society, and that is people attending events like peaceful protests that find themselves in a situation where they need help. And again, I would be malfeasant in my duties if I didn't prepare for that. So we're reviewing our actions. We've already made adjustments. I already know in our planning how we will adjust it in the future. It wasn't intended to work out that way. It was literally in the moment how the kind of scenario unfolded and how officers had to deploy. I worked side by side with the first aid squad. We talk about these things all the time. We talked about it leading up to this. We mobilized that day super quick. We planned for Communiversity Day for months, literally months. And this came together literally from early in the morning that day, under a lot of stress because of the threat environment that was taking place behind the scenes, that information we were getting. So I just say that I acknowledge it, I understand it. We're always going to do better. And I would ask once again that, members of the public that did have a problem with that be directed at me. Our officers, they just carry out, kind of our policies and the direction that I lead them in. So I own that one. I own all of it, actually. And with that, I think I addressed everything that I wanted to.
Thanks, Chief. Ms. Fraga and then Ms. Niedergang after.
Yes. First, Chief, I want to say, no, the words that you spoke in the beginning were very moving. And I just wanted to share that I know that those words were not scripted, because it just so happened that the day after the murder of Mr. Floyd, we were meeting. And I don't know if you recall that you had that exact same reaction, that we were all horrified about what happened, what we witnessed, and horrified. And it wasn't just the one officer. In fact, you shared with me that what the other officers who were standing by, not stopping what was taking place, were also participants in that murder. So I know that your words are sincere. I've known you, I've only been chairing the public safety for the last 2.5 years, but before that, when I served on the Human Services Commission, we had interactions as far as policy, how, you asked for our input. And when there were policies or initiatives that you wanted to improve, you sincerely want to make our department the best that it can be. And I know that whenever something that's brought to my attention or someone else, that I share with you, and you're very quick, you're very responsive, you want to hear from our community, you want to hear when there's issues, and you want to work together on resolving those issues. So I know it's very sincere. I know yesterday we had, there was a vigil at 400 Witherspoon Hall, where some of your officers were there. And even though, they were there because they have been invited to attend. And it wasn't clear whether it was going to be a dialogue or just a listening session. But they were, when there were questions asked, they were responding in the best way they could. And they did. I feel that they really represented our department well. And what has been, I know it must be hurting. I know our whole country is hurting as a nation about what happened, what has been happening. It wasn't just one incident, what continues to happen. But it also hurts that because I know we've been making progress, it also hurts that all police departments are painted with the same brush, because I know we're trying to do better. I know that as far as a person, I don't want to be painted with the same brush as others that may be like, that I represent. So, so I just wanted to say that I know that you're very receptive and responsive, and you truly, truly want, when there's issues, we're not saying that everything's perfect, that we're all perfect, but when there's issues, you truly want to hear from our community, and you want to work together on resolving those issues. Yesterday at the vigil, I know some members that were there raised some concerns about community policing and what negative impact it was having in their community. And there's this perception that there's some neighborhoods that are more policed than others in a negative way. And I know at the time because in the past when I've asked for data, and I don't see for data like prove it, say, give me the data so that we can prove whether there truly is something wrong. But the data as far as how we can evaluate it, and how if there's some flags raised, how can we address it and continue getting that data, those reports, so that we can measure progress. So I know right away, this just came up yesterday and you responded, but there are some addresses. It includes addresses. So could you give us an overview of the report that you provided, or the data that you provided?
Sure. I provided you with all of the calls for service being every documented activity that the police department took during 2019 and 2018. In 2019, it was 38,800 calls for service. So a call, in this context, a call for service would be anything that we're called to and any proactive activity that we take, such as a motor vehicle stop that occurred on Witherspoon Street, or a call that occurred on, or a pedestrian stop or a bicyclist stop for whatever reason on a street. So it's even community policing events. So community policing things that take place on a street, we would document that in the location of it. So, what I tried to, so anyway, in that document, you will find every single call and the location that it occurred at, so that we can take a look at areas that are getting, and I guess the amount of policing that they're getting, for lack of a better word, or response.
Mm-hmm.
I totally get the, I actually, in my position, get complaints maybe from both sides. I get complaints that we're not policing areas enough. People want more patrols for a variety of reasons, whether it be motor vehicle, burglaries, things like that. And then I will get the complaints that you talk about or concerns that we're in a neighborhood too much, or a street or whatever the case may be. And we're cognizant of that. We try to, it's a balancing act, but I think from my perspective, it is really balanced. I think we tend to be in areas mostly because of really, especially in 2019, traffic considerations. We are being called for proactive traffic complaints for us to go somewhere and deal with a complaint. So I guess I would sum it up by saying, like, as you just said, I also realize to some statistics don't paint the full picture, and I tend to agree with that. So I think we need to, and I need to listen to community members about their neighborhoods. And maybe that, to me, this is an action item that we can really affect in Princeton. I mean, I can really control that.
Mm-hmm.
That's something in our ability to control. So we should listen to what the issues are and see how we balance that. Based on the initial review of the numbers that I did quickly today, since I spoke to you yesterday, the areas that were initially, some of the areas that I looked at very quickly that were specifically the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, there were complaints that we were over policing there. And I'm very sensitive to that. I'm very receptive to that. The numbers don't indicate that. Again, the numbers, perception may be a totally different story. And the reality of people living in that neighborhood may be a totally different story. So I want to just say those are numbers. That's what they say. But let's talk about it and why the perception is there and how we can address that. And like I've got that written down already as an action item that we can deal with immediately.
And I wanted to, I mentioned earlier in my announcements that Civil Rights Commission is going to be, is planning to organize a series of community dialogues. So I encourage our members from our community to engage in those, but also not just in those community dialogues where we're voicing our concerns, every year, and I know I've attended several of them, and I'm sure others here who are listening in have as well, that we have community events that include our police from our safe neighborhood units. For example, at the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood last year, they had their first, what they hope to be an annual welcome weekend, welcome to the neighborhood. And our officers were there grilling hot dogs for the community. And it's not just on community night out. Throughout the year, there are events in the community where our officers are there. So I would encourage our residents to get to know our officers. As we work to build trust, it also includes, to get to know them. Just as I'm sure, you want to hear any from our community to have them voice our concerns, but there also needs to be that interaction as well.
I just want to say that you nailed it. That I feel like, and I feel it really strongly. I'm really talking to you deep from within me right now because I think it's important. I feel really strongly that my words in the current climate, I mean, they need to be said. I need to say them for a lot of reasons, but I really feel like the best proof is in our officers. The best proof is in knowing them and listening to them and observing them, knowing who they are and making judgments based on that. They're the best of us. They're the ones coming to your homes. The reality is I'm not coming usually I'm not coming to your home in the middle of the night. It's one of these officers that feel just as strongly as I do, but the community may not get to see them as much as me. And I feel like that's the proof behind my words. And it's one contact at a time.
Right.
And I feel like we have to do it all. I say all over again, it's a continuing process, but we have to start again.
Right, because the same as you also, I know you also want to hear when somebody has a negative experience.
That's how we get better. Mr. Grosser and I often talk a lot about sports and coaching, and your best in certainly in sports and life and school and everything, you learn when you're critiqued and somebody tells you that you didn't do your best, that you could do better. And those are the people. I say this to my our officers, my sons all the time. If somebody doesn't care about you, they won't tell you what you're doing wrong. They tell you you're doing wrong because they want better from you, from your department, from your organization. I feel strongly about that. I know people tell us when we do wrong. I respect it. And I know they say it to us because they care and they want better for the community and the department.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks. Ms. Niedergang, do you have a question for the chief?
Yes, I have a comment, of course, and a question. First of all, again, thank you. I know that you speak from the heart. I know that this is a difficult time for everybody, for officers who are appalled by the behavior they see out there, and for citizens that are on the receiving end of that. And I was also there at the protest on Tuesday, and it was an incredibly moving event. And I'm glad that you and the other officers were able to be there as well. So I wanted to address one of the comments that came up, because about a year and a half ago when I started on council, I did a ride along with one of the officers, which was a really interesting evening. And I guess, unfortunately, that's not really available now in the due to the pandemic, but I hope that it will be something that's available to the community, because it's very educational for me. And one of the things I picked up there, and also in hearing your reports over the past year and a half and asking questions and listening, and is that the police don't just show up when there's a problem, that the whole idea of community policing, and I know that's something that is near and dear to your heart, and certainly to the community policing unit, but to other officers as well, that the point is to build relationships in the community so that problems can be anticipated and addressed before there's an emergency. That if, you know, a kid is having trouble at home, that hopefully there's a relationship with the police, or if someone is, you know, engaging in behavior that's inappropriate or possibly threatening, that they can be talked to before it becomes an emergency situation. And I think that's really important. So I'm sure there are people whose first contact with the police is, you know, when the police get called on them for some reason, but I know that that's not the ideal, that's not the aspiration of the department. So I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to say that, again, from what I've read and from how you speak about policing, I mean, a lot of what police do is kind of what we might regard as social work. I mean, there's a lot of domestic violence calls and domestic disputes, and police are coming in and they're negotiating with people and trying to resolve conflict. And I know that there's a lot of de-escalation training that the department has engaged in. And I want to say that maybe sometime last year, when I came on council, one of the information that was getting delivered to council had to do with always there were reports by race and ethnicity on traffic stops. And at one point, looking it over, I asked the question, well, okay, so these are the traffic stops, but how many people that you stop get tickets, and how many people get released? And the next month there was a report on stops versus summons by race and ethnicity. And based on that, and I've kept a very careful eye on this, and this is not to say that there aren't any issues or problems at all, but that populations, African Americans, Latinx, that in other areas receive tickets out of proportion or summonses out of proportion to the norm. That does not happen at Princeton, at least if the data that's collected is accurate. And I think that's a big step and an important step. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your lack of defensiveness when people push you and ask you for information. I do really appreciate that. Now I have perhaps some harder questions, and forgive me if some of this is already being done. So a few things. I think one of the big concerns that people have about policing and the defund the police, I think part of that is demilitarize the police. As you know, the county bought an armored vehicle last year, which in my mind is horrendous, and there's no place for that and no need for that. So one of the things I wanted to address with you, I have 3 questions, so I'll just get them all out at once. One is to what extent, in terms of weaponry and other types of like militarization of the Princeton police, how would you characterize that? And to the extent that we have any types of weapons out of the norm of a service revolver, anything like that, I'd appreciate you speaking about it. So that's one. I wanted to know if there's implicit bias training happening for officers, and especially if I know that the police, it is a hierarchical institution. And for example, one of the officers that was present at George Floyd's death apparently said something, but a senior officer, one of the rookies said something, and a senior officer just, how much would a younger ranking officer in the police, in our police force, push back? So that maybe that's a 2-part question. And the last question is whether in our use of force review, is there anything like a civilian review board? And if not, might that be something that we can institute? Thank you.
Got it. So let me start with the civilian review board. Talked about it over the years many times, I think locally. I mean, dating back early into my career, I remember conversations. It's always been a topic in policing. The Attorney General recently addressed it in his Excellence in Policing initiative. He addressed it in the Internal Affairs Guideline. I invite everybody to look at this online. The New Jersey Attorney General's Guideline on Internal Affairs Policies. Towards the end, he addresses civilian review boards. I don't want to paraphrase or get it wrong. He addressed it because it's been an issue in New Jersey, and it's been a hotly debated topic in courts, in the court system in New Jersey as well, because it relates to a lot of complicated issues. It basically, I shouldn't characterize it. I should allow everybody to read it and make a judgment on what his interpretation of it is. But I would say from my perspective, it's a common debate, if you will. People are kind of on both sides of it. I've studied it greatly. I think there's some things that are beneficial about it, some things that aren't, and I always invite the conversation. So I think that's kind of where I would leave that. It's a solution that many people see as viable in the state. With regards to training and implicit bias training, I put our training up against any training in the country in all aspects of training, but specifically with regards to bias. And I also would say that we've been doing it, documenting it, and publishing it for a long time. So we have a training report in our annual reports. The 2019 report will be out soon. It got a little derailed with our COVID response, kind of took me off task. But implicit bias is real. We recognize it in policing. We recognize the effects it can have on policing. We do bias and implicit bias training from a lot of different venues. We do it with civilian groups and policing groups. I think that's important. It's been a major part of our of our curriculum for some time. So and again, that'll be in our reports. You'll see some of it from our previous annual reports that are online, but you'll also see it in our 2019 report coming up soon. With regard to militarization, we've been talking about militarization of policing since at least since Ferguson, where it became a major issue for police forces. And I've stated repeatedly when asked, and still it remains the same, we have never accepted any type of military equipment, armor, weapons, any other type of military equipment from military surplus. We have no other weaponry or vehicles or devices that are outside of what's considered civilian policing. We do have, in addition to our regular, what I would call, our sidearms, we have additional weaponry that's been common use in law enforcement for many years. And we've had this weaponry nothing's changed since pre-2000, I believe, of what we currently carry, around 2000-ish. Like, I think it was actually prior to 2000. Nothing fully automatic at all, nothing that would be considered a military issued weapon, without getting into specifics about it, which I maybe shouldn't. I'm not quite sure. It's I assure you, it's been something that I'm not it's not the type of culture that we want here, or that we are prepared. We strike a balance between proving our legitimacy, being sympathetic to concerns, but also being prepared to respond. And although I get, unfortunately, left with that responsibility, that I can look everyone in the eye and tell them, I'm prepared to respond to whatever happens here to some extent. And I have to continue to prepare that way, but I do so balancing that. So that's a conversation I always welcome, is that we should continue to monitor and keep track of. And all of our purchases that we go through with regard to this equipment go through council. So it's something that we can always, when they come up, that we can discuss publicly, and that you'll see it's a very transparent process. And then finally, and maybe one part that hit home to me, was when you said about those other officers that didn't act. Probably in the culture of policing, again, this is my personal opinion, as years coming up and reading and studying police corruption, I think one would find that the most common fact of it, or the personality of corruption, is that other officers never said anything. And became complicit and or silent on it. And I'm super sensitive about that. And I've, since I became chief, I was trying to get a specific example as I was talking to you here, but I can give you an example and send it to you. I issue a letter to every new officer that comes in the door their first day of work. And every officer since I've been chief has gotten one of these letters, and it's delivered in person, and we talk about the letter. And the letter talks about a lot of things. And in paragraph 3, it says in my letter that I expect your understanding as to what is ethically right or ethically wrong is absolutely exemplary. I must demand that you will confront ethical issues throughout your career, whether in a public way, with suspects, with coworkers, and you do so with courage, honesty, and character. You must always do what's right. You must always demand that your colleagues do what's right. I go on to talk about how, as new officers, they find themselves automatically in a position of what we call, junior authority, if you will. Everybody's senior to them on the department, from the person that was hired right before them. And I explain very clearly, with absolutely no gray area, that if I do something wrong and you, the most junior officers, see it, you have to report it immediately, or you're as complicit as I am. And that's the leadership that I expect from you. and that's why you were picked for this job, because it's tough and I know you can do it. And that's the truth. And until we get to a point where I understand the culture of policing and I understand 25 years ago when I got hired as a young officer, how difficult that could be. But I know I knew that day I could do it. And I expect everybody that comes in here to do it, because it tarnishes, failure to do so tarnishes every one of us. And as we're seeing now, this is the most tragic of events, the most tragic example. The more common examples are the things that could happen on a day-to-day basis that you may think are even maybe not important. They're important to me and they're important to us and they should be important to us. And they know that. So I think I feel really good there that I've been doing this for a long time, and that every officer in this door that walked through here, if you pick them out one by one, I think they would tell you that.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Fraga?
I know I already went a long time, but this is actually, I think it was relevant. Chief, when you were reporting about the police presence at last week's rally, you mentioned the presence was there because there was a credible threat. And I think a couple of days ago, I shared with you a picture that someone had sent to me that clearly identifies someone carrying a sign for a neo-Nazi group, identifies as neo-Nazi white nationalist. But I don't know if others did, obviously I felt probably to incite and to start something. The person that took the photo shared with me that they felt uncomfortable and even threatened when they saw that sign, and they ended up leaving. I think what possibly why others may not have noticed it is because it also included a sticker that said "Fighting for Racial Justice," which we now know it was probably just one race that they were referring to. But I just wanted to share that, because when you said that police were there because there was credible threat, thank goodness it was just one individual, and obviously nothing came of it. But they were there.
Yeah, and yes, and thank you for sharing that. We've unfortunately we've seen that before here in Princeton, and we like to think that just I guess it was last year or the year before, with kind of similar groups, if you will, as the one you just described. So yeah, and I say this a lot at the Public Safety Committee. It's my job to get these things, filter them, and respond. And 9 times out of 10, we're able to prepare in the background and be ready while maintaining a very limited type of presence in terms of, our actions and things like that. And this time, circumstances kind of just dictated that those officers had to respond. And, I recognize the unfortunate fact that happened, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Thank you, Chief.
Are there any other questions for the chief? All right. Thank you so much. And then Ms. Perlambros, did you have?
I just want to say thank you to Chief Sutter. I think we all feel the same way. That you have been exemplary and very heartfelt speech tonight, and telling us how you feel. And I just want to weigh in with what Councilwoman Fraga shared, that at that public safety meeting the day after the murder, you brought it up, and you told us how this affects all of you and how much of a setback this is in the community, and it reflects on you. And I just wanted to thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, Mayor, I just wanted to add, I know a little bit earlier I got a little heated and I probably used some very strong words, and not to rehash that, but the last 2 weeks have been extremely emotional for me also, and I'm sure you saw some of that emotion come out. And in my own experience, I've seen the best, I've seen the worst of policing. I grew up in as many of you know, I grew up in a very impoverished area of Trenton. I experienced a lot of high crime. When I was a kid growing up, I thought it was normal for police to yell at you, because I grew up in a place where police always yelled at me. And I thought that was normal until later on, I realized that it wasn't normal. But I also grew up in a place where, as a young immigrant kid in Trenton, my family often had to dial 911, protect us from extreme violence from some of our neighbors for no other reason than we were new to the neighborhood, and even after we've been there for several years. I add to that, when I hear the term defunding police, I know Councilwoman Niedergang mentioned about the militarization of police, et cetera. I've always considered myself to be a fighter for justice and a fighter for Black progress, which I think is American progress. I'm fully aware of the history of the development of police in our country. Police were initially used at one point to be slave catchers, et cetera, and a lot of the negative issues associated with that. However, when I hear defunding, what comes back to me is a lot of what Martin Luther King talked about during the civil rights movement, where he was so concerned at times about many of the other groups, the more militant groups, talking about our country needs to consider communism, Marxist Leninism, Maoism, and how that was used by the enemies of progress as saying, if you give them this, that is what they're actually looking for. You see folks of the right doing that right now. So when we start by, I am open to the ideas of different people, and I apologize if I sounded earlier to be so dismissive of new ideas. However, I am very much fearful when we start with things that are considered non-starters, that at the end of the day impede progress. When I feel I've committed my life, and many of us here are committed to doing better things. We're committed to better policing. We're committed to asking Chief Sutter the hard questions when he does his reports to us. So that being said, it to me is not just being protective of the police. When I hear someone says to defund the police, to me it almost feels like a poison pill. And I apologize because I know that some of the names that were mentioned mean well, and these are folks I've known from not in our town meetings, et cetera. And I don't want to lengthen our meeting, but I just felt it was very important to say. My goal is for progress in America and progress for all people in America. And I will do what I can, and we're blessed to have a mayor, a council, a police chief, and many citizens who are on the right side of progress. And so when I see something that I feel it will impede progress, I just felt it's a duty to speak about it. So that said, my intent was not to insult those who are coming up with ideas that are very different than norm when they use the word defund. Maybe we can talk about how resources are allocated. Maybe we can talk about better training for police, et cetera. But defund to me means defund. So that being said, I look forward to progressive, respectful dialogue, and dialogue where I don't use words like ridiculous and my emotion doesn't come out. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. Okay, why don't we finish the reports and then we'll move on. So are there any other staff reports?
Mayor, I'd like to just get everybody caught up real quick on COVID-19 pandemic response. Locally, we've really lowered a lot of our incidence rates. In the last 7 days, we've seen about 8 cases compared to our highest 7-day total of 30, which we saw at the middle to end of April. And we've had 11 cases over the last 2 weeks compared to our 14-day total of 55 end of April and early May. That's a good sign, but nationally, we're starting to see certain states that have begun to reopen, seeing their highest incidence rates actually happening right now. Florida, Georgia, a few other southern states are still seeing some peaks that New Jersey saw nearly a month ago. So, with that said, I know there's a lot of things reopening. We're working very closely with the Princeton Rec Department to make sure that as this guidance comes out, they're ready to go with whatever decision they make but to make sure that the Princeton residents are safe. I want to just make sure it's very clear that, as we're seeing this decline in cases, a lot of people are starting to think that we're coming out of this. And I need to make sure everybody's pretty cautious about that. History has told us before that, in the pandemic, Spanish flu pandemic, 1918, 1919, some of the worst came around the corner in the fall. Not to scare anyone about that, but we just have to make sure we're cautious about reopening. And I think New Jersey overall has done a relatively good job slowly coming back into reopening. And it's given local health departments the ability to work with businesses and other groups to try to reopen safely. With that said, we need to make sure that our contact tracing's up to par. Fortunately, in Princeton, we have up to 14 contact tracers right now at any given moment, actively contact tracing. If any Princeton residents have concerns over who's calling them over contact tracing and asking about their whereabouts or who they potentially had contact with, if it doesn't seem like it's completely credible, we're urging the public to please contact the Princeton Health Department at 609-497-7608. And if there's any other questions about that, they can always call the police department. New Jersey still hasn't rolled out the state contact tracing plan. So Princeton is continuing with our volunteer group that's been actively working. We've done a very good job of reaching out to now over 1,400 people to do contact tracing. And we've been very active with that to make sure we suppress disease. This is going to take a lot more effort as we start to reopen, because obviously as you reopen, people have jobs that they go to and other places they're able to go to, and that increases the number of people, ultimately that have to be contacted. Lastly, I just want to mention, we've talked a lot about long-term care centers, and for me to take this long to talk about long-term care centers during a pandemic where it's impacted them greatly is actually good news. Princeton Care Center, I was just notified, and a lot of this credit goes to Chief Sutter. The National Guard's actually being deployed there tomorrow. Not to, again, to say that this probably could have come about 4 weeks ago. And Nick Sutter brought that up with both the county OEM and state OEM, but obviously resources are thin at this point. And at this point, they're going to be deployed to Princeton Care Center. We made the ask specifically to them, like I said, about a month ago, and then I believe it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago when the commissioner and the state enacted the executive order that required all long-term care centers to test all staff and patients. We started to look at the epidemiological data and realizing that staffing could potentially be an issue moving ahead even into the future, just as a result of the required testing. So as a result, Chief Sutter made the request for National Guard through county OEM and state OEM, and I'm assuming that's how it's being deployed for there tomorrow. So they're not actually providing direct care, but they will be providing very basic services, like even just dropping off meals, taking individuals outside if they need a breath of fresh air, if they're from the well cohort, and just doing basic care things, but nothing medically treating. And then lastly, I just want to mention, definitely deeply moved by Chief Sutter's remarks there. As a younger public servant in government, I've always looked up to Nick, and I just want to mention that the police department is where we go for help, even internally. And the Princeton Health Department, we're 4 strong. We got 4 full-time employees, and we can't be everywhere at once. And when we can't be, we call the police, and they help us out internally as well. So I have to add to what Councilwoman Niedergang and Councilwoman Fraga mentioned about police being social workers as well. In my mind, they're also public health workers. And whenever Chief decides to retire, I'll hire him at the health department any day. Thanks.
Ms. Niedergang?
Thanks, Officer Grosser. I just had a quick question. We get daily updates from you, and in perusing one of those, you talked about the state contact tracing plan. Reading between the lines somewhat, I had the sense that you would prefer that Princeton be able to remain on its own than this, rather than be placed within a county-wide system in which, for example, you might be following a West Windsor patient, or someone from, Hamilton follow a Princeton patient, which, again, to me, and I'm not a health officer at all, but that makes more sense because you'll know the people involved, having been doing this for so long. You'll know the people, you'll know the community. It just seems such an advantage to have people work within their community if they can, and call for help only if necessary. But did I misunderstand how it was structured, or is it kind of just like, oh, you're going to do West Windsor tomorrow and if my understanding is accurate, is there anything that we can do, or is this a fait accompli and nothing? Anyway, sorry, I hope you understand what I'm asking.
No, the way you described is exactly how I felt at times. Some of the original planning for contact tracing from the state was going to be distributed to the counties. And it sounded as if Princeton, and the way they were going to be delegated to the health departments, was that the army of contact tracers the state was going to hire were essentially going to assist local health departments. But at the county level structure, if they didn't have enough people to handle the contacts that were coming in, they would actually ask local health departments to do contact tracing. The detail was that Princeton, for instance, would not be contact tracing for Princeton residents. We would be contact tracing for anyone in Mercer County, depending on who has that structure set up. We're very fortunate in Princeton, and I'm all for supporting our other local jurisdictions. However, as you mentioned, Councilwoman Niedergang, yeah, there are specific instances where we run into a situation, and we've had it before. An individual needs assistance with quarantine or isolation, and they need housing within an hour based upon childcare issues, something like that. Locally, we can handle that. We've done it. We've brought people to places, right now we're working with the Princeton Theological Seminary. We'll get them basic necessities for the 2-week period of quarantine or isolation. And I think that is the local flavor that we get. We've also done a tremendous job training individuals here in Princeton to get them ready for a potential surge moving forward. So, we've done a lot to get prepared, and I'm happy, again, as I mentioned, to support any other towns. However, I just want to make sure that whatever ends up getting rolled out from the county or the state, I want to make sure Princeton's aware that it should be helping us, not hindering our progress with the tremendous work we've done with contact tracing up until this point.
So I'm sorry, I have to follow up with that. Wasn't entirely clear if there is anything we can do at the county or state level to advocate. Is the horse out and the barn door is shut, or is there still an opportunity to push for localities being on the first line of defense, and then if they need help, they go elsewhere? Or
I know the push has been put out there. I know from Dr. DiFerdinando, and I know, we talked very well about our progress this far with Mayor Lempert. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of specifics with regards to the state plan that have been rolled out. There was a state conference call on actually the previous 2 Saturday mornings. We've had state conference calls about contact tracing, and each time, we're not getting the level of detail where I feel like I can implement a plan locally, which is why we're continuing with our local plan, which is working right now. And I believe could continue into the fall and continue to work.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. So given the time, I just want to see if everybody's okay with pushing the rest of the reports to after the resolutions, because there's a couple resolutions I think we have members of the public here for. And so if council's okay, I'd like to move on to the first couple resolutions tonight, which are 2191, promotion of Officer Daniel Federico to Sergeant, and 2192, promotion of Officer Michael Strobel to Corporal. And I don't know if the Chief wanted to add anything about these. I mean, I think council is well aware that these promotions have been in the works for quite a while, and are important to make sure we have people in in key positions, facing a lot of retirements that we've seen.
Yeah, Mayor, real briefly, this is part of the, these are positions that are being replaced due to attrition, due to retirements. This fits into the whole recruiting kind of restructuring plan that we've gone through over the last really 6 years or so. And we've talked about this at length, but I would just add that all the issues that I talked about earlier come down to a lot of different things. But in the end, it comes down to a morally strong, good people policing and supervising your police officers on the road at the time the event is occurring. All those things we talked about. And all of our supervisors do, but these two officers epitomize that. They have my utmost trust, and I would trust them with my life. I would trust them with my family, and that's the biggest compliment I can give them. I would say that about all of our officers, but I just wanted to say that about these two as they move on in a pivotal part of their careers and for the department. And
I want to congratulate both of them. And as someone with 2 graduating seniors, it's we have to set aside a lot of our normal traditions for events like these right now. But is there somebody who'd like to move both of these resolutions?
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Ms. Fraga. Is there a second?
I'll
Second by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. All in favor of 2191 and 2192?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, resolutions passed unanimously. And
Congratulations.
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 Next is 2193, resolution authorizing lease of public property by submission of sealed bids for wireless telecommunications facility installation on the roof and in the penthouse of Witherspoon Municipal Hall at 400 Witherspoon Street. Ms. Stockton, oh, sorry, Mr. Cohen, did you have a question about this?
Nope.
Are you going to move it?
Going to move it, yeah.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second. Michelle, second.
Okay, seconded by Michelle Pearl-Lambros.
I
don't
do
know if
have
anybody's getting squeaking or if that's just me. Yeah.
I do have a
Okay.
quick question, but I know you wanted to ask Engineer Stockton to speak, so she could speak and then I could ask my question.
Sure, thank you. The resolution before you is, again, a little bit of housekeeping. We've had a temporary agreement with Verizon to house their wireless system in the penthouse and on the roof of 400 Witherspoon Street. We're moving ahead to replace that temporary agreement with a permanent lease agreement. We did this most recently about 5 years ago with AT&T. And so this is looking to just formalize a new lease agreement. It's going out to bid. And so Verizon may not be the only bidder. And if that is the case, then there's also a provision that allows us to notify Verizon to remove all of their equipment from the penthouse and the lease and the roof area. Ms. Niedergang, did you have a question?
That's a perfect segue for my question, which is the resolution itself says it is a non-exclusive lease. So I guess I'm wondering why we can't accommodate more than one. I mean, it seems you could get more money that way. Is it a matter of there not being enough room, or the equipment would interfere? Like, why couldn't we sign an agreement with more than one company?
It is a matter of space. We currently have 2 vendors in that space right now, the AT&T lease as well as Verizon. Okay. So unless we limited the amount available for the wireless provider, there would be no way to add, say, a third to that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it's been moved by Mr. Cohen. Was there a second?
I seconded it.
Okay,
I-
right. Thank you. Seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. If there's no other comments or questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2194. Resolution ratifying award of contract to Nelson Glass and Aluminum Company for procurement of glass counter shields for Princeton municipal offices and recreation facilities in an amount not to exceed $13,740. Is there a motion to approve?
I
So
make a
moved. Oh,
I second.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang and seconded by Ms. Sachs. Any questions or comments on this one, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I did have a question. I had thought when we were talking about this earlier that we were talking about plexiglass shields, and it looked like the quote was for glass shields. And I was wondering if you could clarify which it is and if there's a reason why glass is preferable.
It's actually plexiglass.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2195. Resolution declaring racism a public health crisis. It's moved by Ms. Fraga. Is that why you're raising your hand?
Yes.
Yep. And seconded by Mr. Williamson.
And can I
Um,
just say something, as the liaison to the Civil Rights Commission, I just wanted to move this forward because I feel that it truly reflects who we are as a community, and especially what the discussion that we were having earlier about including members in our community in the decision making, and truly wanting to use our racial equity lens when we're reviewing policies and ordinances.
Absolutely.
And I do want to give a shout out to the reason, in large part, this is on our agenda. It's a partnership with Montgomery Township, and Mayor Sadaf Jafar reached out to me. This is something that they're working on as well. And she was instrumental in helping to help us draft this. And my assumption is probably in the coming weeks, you'll see Montgomery move forward with something similar, which is really terrific because I know already our health department has a close relationship with the Montgomery Health Department. I work together all the time with Mayor Jaffer. She's a great colleague. And this is something where we can learn from one another. And it's something long overdue, but an area where I think we're all sort of feeling our way. So it's an exciting way to be able to work with one of our neighbors.
I actually also wanted to add that since it became, since it was on the agenda, I've had individuals reach out to me. I don't know if they reached out to you as well, asking for a draft because they wanted to present, to suggest to their municipality or where they're living that they also consider it.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, and I just
And
wanna
I would
add-
also, sorry, we've received also some other resources that folks have sent to us too. So, hopefully this resolution is taken also just as a call to action. And as we receive more materials, I expect that CRC will be a great partner with this. Also the Personnel Committee. And I know Mr. DeShield has some ideas too. But that we can, make sure that we're on the lookout for best practices and things that other communities are doing around the country, and bring those here to Princeton. Ms. Niedergang?
Oh, I just wanted
sorry.
to, I just wanted,
Sorry.
I was
Sorry.
first. I just wanted to say that I appreciate that it's not just a resolution, an aspirational resolution, that there are real concrete steps in there. And I think that's something we've been thinking about and talking about for a long time, and viewing our actions through a lens of equity, of racial equity. And I'm just really glad to see this on the agenda and to have it before us. So,
Right.
Mr. Williamson.
And as we mentioned, our community partners that we also remember, like Not in Our Town, Princeton, et cetera, who contribute material that can be useful as we aspire to be our best selves. Thanks.
Yeah, most definitely. Ms. Sachs?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Not in Our Town had made a recommendation that we put some teeth in the resolution, including evaluating all our policies through an assessment, racial equity impact assessments. And I had forwarded some information about that last night. And I'm just wondering, are we, what are our thoughts about that?
My thoughts, as far as what Mayor Lempert had mentioned earlier, that some of those suggestions can go to the CRC, who would then be able, that's their role, to make recommendations on policy. Definitely, and actually one of our members of our Civil Rights Commission is also a member of Not in Our Town. So I could see our commission moving some of those recommendations forward because they haven't met yet this month. So I'll give them an opportunity to take a look at those and move them forward as recommendations to mayor and council.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to look around, and my sense is there's probably a number of different tools that can be used, and that that I'm sure they all have sort of different positives to them, but that maybe CRC could help with just a review of what other communities are using. And just check in and see what seems to be working best. And that that tool that was sent to us, that might be the best one. But it's pretty specific. So I think we should just take a look at it, make sure that it is something that that is well suited to Princeton. And if not, to look around and see what other tools we might be able to use. But I think the intention of having something that is going to actually help us make a determination or use as a tool to help evaluate our decision making. I mean, I think the more specific we have, and the having a framework in place is going to enable us to actually do the work. So we definitely appreciate having that suggestion, and CRC will take a look at it. Mr. Cohen?
I just wanted to say that I was so pleased to see this on the agenda, because as you read through it, you see the resolution making the connection between not just racism, but also economic disparity and the health crisis. And these are the three great crises that our country is experiencing right now: this economic downturn, the health crisis, and the crisis of racism. They've all come together in this moment. And I think that this is just a really fantastic to respond to all three of those in one swoop.
Agree.
David, very well put.
Yes, and I wanted to read a relevant comment that came in on this from Wilma Solomon. This is a historic moment in many ways, including your decision to consider resolution asserting that racism is a public health crisis affecting our entire community. It would be a milestone in this community. Not in Our Town, Princeton supports proposed resolution 2195. The announcement also stated the intention of identifying a series of actions, including assessments of internal policies and procedures to ensure racial equity is a core element of all municipal departments. We recommend that you consider using a process called Racial Equity Impact Statements, REIS, in your examination. A few cities and counties are using it. In 2018, the New Jersey legislature adopted REIS to address the state's high rate of racial disparity in incarceration. The Princeton Board of Education is in the process of drafting REIS questions to gather data for use in their decision making. We applaud this major step. So we will definitely be taking a look at that, and we really appreciate the suggestion. And if other folks are listening who are interested in this, who have other suggestions for us, we welcome those, and we'll be sure to share with Montgomery too, because like I said before, I know they're working on this as well. If there are no other questions or comments, then I'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. And now we come to 2196, resolution extending term of contract with IPS Group Incorporated. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, Peter Gang. Any questions on this one?
Yes, I have a question. Since our meters have largely not been in operation for the last 3 months and are, I don't know, I mean, my second question is, do we have any idea when we might, as things are reopening, when we might be reintroducing the meters? But for the last 3 months, we really haven't been using them, and it doesn't seem like perhaps we'll be using them this month. So I wonder if there's any way to postpone the implementation of the contract until we actually start using the meters again, or get any kind of credit based on the last 3 months in which I assume they weren't doing the work that they would normally do, or perhaps that's a misconception
Well,
of my understanding of what they're doing, but
well,
Mr. Shield, did you want to address that? And then I know Ms.
Sure,
Burnham
and I'll
wants to
start
speak
with
also.
the kind of first part of that in terms of enforcement. We've had our enforcement people taking a look at the downtown. We are at a point where we want to make sure that we encourage more turnover as we're seeing business going back. So we will be seeing enforcement coming back. I've been talking to the chief very shortly. In terms of the program, in terms of the IPS meters, they're, and Deanna could probably, if I get this wrong, hopefully I have this completely right, is you're paying for, when those meters are out there, they are still on, they're still transmitting on a regular basis. Still continue to have to pay those fees for their transmission. We're just not collecting cash in the meters.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
I think Mr. DeShield answered the question. I was just going to say the Merchants Association did request that enforcement be back on in order to, open up parking spaces, because there has been a request for that. So we are moving towards that. That's it.
Thanks. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this one? All in favor?
I
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2197, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton approving a professional services agreement with Princeton Senior Resource Center from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, and then the not to exceed amount of $152,388. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Sachs. Is there a second?
second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. And there were a couple comments that came in on this that I'd like to read. Mayor Lempert and members of council, thank you on behalf of the Princeton Senior Resource Center. I'm grateful for your partnership and your trust in our nonprofit organization to provide programming and social services. Oh, I forgot to say, this is from Drew Dyson. Grateful for your partnership and your trust in our nonprofit organization to provide programming and social services for the older adults in Princeton. In this challenging time of global pandemic, the need for such a partnership has never been more clear. Since the early days of the COVID-19 crisis, PSRC took a lead in connecting community organizations and supporting the municipality to serve those who are most vulnerable in the face of this virus. PSRC continues to offer social services, individual connections and wellness calls, virtual programming, safe food delivery service, intergenerational programming, and much more. While virtually all senior centers in our region were forced to simply close their doors, PSRC has found a way to open ours even wider while keeping our seniors safe. As this pandemic will continue to keep many seniors from gathering in groups, thus requiring the continuance of virtual programming and social services for the foreseeable future, we would encourage the council to investigate ways to provide blanket Wi-Fi access in town, particularly in our affordable housing and senior housing complexes. PSRC continues to provide tech support for all our constituents. It has provided devices to several people who needed a way to access the internet. However, affordable and accessible Wi-Fi coverage is still a significant need. Once again, PSRC is thankful for our partnership with the municipality of Princeton, and we look forward to many years of continued service to the older adults in our community.
Yeah.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros.
I just want to make a comment and thank Mr. Dyson for the all the programming that you do, and a shout out to our colleague, Council President Cohen, as well, for the buddy system of the neighborhood, just reaching out to help the seniors get food delivered very early on, to let them stay home. And so I just wanted to thank you for that.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. And next is 2198, resolution authorizing the tax collector to process third quarter estimated tax bills due August 1st, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is
Second.
there seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros? Any questions or discussion on this one? It looks like I can't tell if there's a question coming in from Beth Barrand. Maybe not. Do you see something, Mr. DeShield? No. Okay. Mr. Cohen, did you have a question?
Yeah, since I see Sandy joining, I just was curious, what kind of receipts did we have towards the end of June, towards the end of May? You know, how many people took advantage of the that sort of longer grace period that we enacted last month?
Yeah, a lot of people had already paid, you know, upfront prior to when we passed the, or, you know, when the extension was granted until. We're a little bit down from where we were from last year, but not really all that much in terms of our collection. So we're pretty happy with the way everything has turned out for us.
Great. Thanks.
Great.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, resolution passes unanimously. All right, so now we'll go back to reports. Ms. Stockton, did you have a report, or are there any other staff reports?
Yes, I was just going to give a quick update on construction projects. The side path on Alexander Street was paved today between West Drive and Basin Street. The contractor will be back out to do restoration of the grass areas in the next week or two. They will be moving their operations over to Mount Lucas Road to mill and resurface the area of the road between Valley and Cherry Hill Road. So milling will occur on Wednesday, paving on Thursday, and striping on Friday, weather permitting. That's it.
Great, thank you. Any other staff reports? Okay, if not, then we'll move to council reports, and starting with Mr. Cohen, any reports for this evening?
Yeah, I have two very brief reports. One, I wanted to let everyone know that the Flood and Stormwater Management Committee had another great meeting on June 5th. This time we heard a presentation from Zenon Tech Charney regarding possibilities for involving the community in identifying problem areas for flooding. It's a crucial first step in developing a better understanding of where our challenges lie in creating a more effective community-wide stormwater management system. And there will be opportunities for volunteers from the community to be involved in this effort. So I encourage people who are interested in participating, they can reach out to me or Badnace, who's the new chair of the Flood and Stormwater Committee. We're just beginning to get procedures in place for how volunteers can get involved, but I think it's going to be an interesting and useful thing for the community. And then the other report was just that the master plan subcommittee of the planning board met on June 1st and voted unanimously to recommend the green building and environmental sustainability element to the full board for review and hopefully approval. That's going to happen on June 18th. So this has been a Herculean effort with input from many, many people, PEC and others, and really pleased with how it's turned out. And I encourage people who are interested to attend that meeting of the planning board on the 18th to learn more.
Great, thank you. Ms. Fraga, any reports?
Very briefly, on May 28th, there was a special meeting of the Human Services Commission where the Director of Human Services and the Chair of the Princeton Children's Fund conducted a presentation about the eligibility requirements, the protocol, and also procedures for applying to the Coronavirus Emergency Relief Fund. This presentation was followed by a Q&A session. And because there were several individuals who have expressed an interest in viewing a recording of that presentation and the Q&A session, I just wanted to report that that session is now available in the Human Services Commission webpage by going to the past meeting section and looking for the May 28th special meeting link. That's it.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes, I do have just a couple of brief reports from the Environmental Committee. Just one report on the initial stages of something that's being termed the Green Necklace, which is the idea of developing and connecting land, some of which is already designated open space and some of which is slated for development and some of which is at this point privately held, but not slated imminently for development. And the idea of the Green Necklace is to preserve public land, open spaces, and biodiversity, to prevent flooding, and to create a beautiful network of public lands that can be used for people in the community to actually walk or cycle from one part of the community to another on a seamless network of lands that are open to the public. So it's an idea that's pretty much in its initial stages, but hopefully we'll hear more about it. And I think it's a very exciting development. We're at a point in Princeton where the last of our large tracts of public lands are possibly threatened with development, and not only in terms of potential flooding and loss of environment in terms of our fight against climate change. There are all kinds of reasons why preservation of this land for the use of the public and for nature is really important. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the PEC had been, the Princeton Environmental Commission had been promoting remote steering cleanups, which we've had a few people participating in. And basically you can clean up anywhere in Princeton, wherever you go, just bring a trash bag and pair of gloves with you, pick up trash. And if you want to register what you've done, you can go to the Watershed Institute's website and they have a map, and some people have posted pictures of them with their trash, but although that's officially over at the end of May, there's no reason why you can't continue. And I know that because of the heavy use our parks have gotten, there is more trash on the streets and in the parks than has been typical. So please bring a bag with you and pick up trash as you go and participate in keeping Princeton clean. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williamson?
Nothing to add beyond what I did earlier in announcements.
Okay. Ms. Sachs?
Yeah, just a couple things. I wanted to just second what David said about how exciting it is to finally, after quite a few years, have the green building and sustainability element passing. And this was something that first originated in the Environmental Commission which was one of the first things I did in the community. So it's just really, really gratifying and exciting to have it finally being passed so that it can actually be a tool for the planning board to use. And I just want to, I mean, there were so many people that helped, and it was a real model for how the town is able to use the tremendous expertise that we have, but in particular, Heidi Fichtenbaum, and as David mentioned, actually, I think that was in the stormwater report, but Zenon Tech Charney has really championed this and from the beginning. And Louise Wilson, who is the vice chair of the planning board, has been so patient in with all of our perfectionism and shepherding through all the mini drafts. And Christine Symington, I don't know if I mentioned, but was really good at aligning the final draft with the objectives of the climate action plan and making sure that the two work harmoniously in how we shape policy. And I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting. It's just exciting. Okay, and a couple other quick things. One, the IT committee met and we finally have gotten to the root at some of the connectivity problems that have been plaguing the staff. And there are some issues in the server room that some of the equipment is quite ancient, and it's time to upgrade. And so we have some preliminary estimates about on what that will take. And then we also stressed with our consultant the need to move the bulk of to move to the cloud, so to for most of our storage needs, so that should another wave of COVID hit in the fall or winter, we want to be prepared so that our employees can seamlessly transition to remote access. So hopefully we'll be more prepared next time. Hopefully we won't need it, but and then finally, I just wanted to mention in terms of, well, that I met with Deanna Stockton and the engineering department, and we to discuss what is possible in terms of the implementing GIS. And I know that we had downgraded it from being a top council goal this year because we couldn't do a comprehensive rollout, but I was really heartened to hear that there's still a lot of functionality that's possible. And so stay tuned for that, and we'll be hearing more about that. So that's it.
Great, thanks. And Councilwoman Pearl Lambros?
Couple of things briefly. I just want to mention that we're working really together diligently with the staff, the compliance committee, and the business community, and the bike advisory committee, and Sustainable Princeton, really to come up with some solutions for reopening, which the governor gave the executive order could happen after next Monday, when we have the ordinance to have a public hearing on. So we're trying to line everything up so we can, be nimble and quick about getting safely reopened and having good social distancing and other opportunities. But there's some good things I think that we're working on. And I encourage any businesses out there that might need more information to reach out to me, and I can help with that. And then the second, very briefly, is I want to mention that I'm working with the fire committee on doing a launch of a recruitment program for the firefighters, the volunteer firefighters, which are so essential to our force. And so I'm working together with them on that, and you'll see more soon. So thank you. That's it.
Great, thank you. Okay. And if there's no more reports, we can move on to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by single vote. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? Nope. All right. And then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry, Councilman Cohen, before we adjourn, Can I just make sure there are some questions and comments, follow up for Chief Sutter in the dialogue box? And I took photos of them, but I'm sure that's not the most efficient way to get those to him. Can we make sure that those at the, I don't know what happens to them once the
Yeah,
meeting.
and you know what? I did say that we would do, if there were any comments that hadn't been read before, I can read them now. I think that some of them came in late. I sort of feel like we should take a minute. I mean, it's like, it's closed, so don't keep writing more, but I'm just gonna read what was here.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that Chief Sutter get that these comments get relayed to Chief Sutter in particular, but.
Okay. There were there were just, I think a few, Natalie Levine, thank you, Chief Sutter, for your remarks. I do not doubt that every member of your force is carefully hired, well trained, and honorable. My remarks earlier were clearly not about any individual on the force, in the same way that the funding of positions in our schools and other human services area is frequently re-examined to make sure it is the most efficient and effective use of public funds. I simply ask that we are able to have a conversation about whether there are opportunities to redirect funds for the most efficient and economical service to the public. For example, as Councilperson Niedergang just mentioned, the police serve many of the functions of municipal social workers. It would probably be cheaper to hire and equip unarmed municipal social workers to serve as those functions. Thank you to everyone for their openness this evening, and I look forward to continuing these conversations as a community. Mike said, thank you, Chief, and all the officers of the PPD. Stand tall with honor and dignity. And I think that was, those are the ones that came in that I see, so.
I'm sorry, there is another one from Patty Soul that also directed at the chief. Can I just read it?
Sure.
Okay, what Chief Sutter just said about the officers in riot gear, he said that it wasn't riot gear, but anyway, in riot gear is not what the policewoman explained to me on Sunday. So I'd just love to have him be able to clarify that with her.
Okay, is there anything else? Close out tonight's meeting? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Try again. So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Fraga. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody, and good night.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night.